All right. This is gonna be, well, I guess hello first of all. It's been a while since my last My Type video update, but this is gonna be number 7. It's kind of chronicling where I've seen myself in MBTI type space. This will be entry number 7 in the My Type series. Hopefully the last, but I'm not gonna. Well, I guess hopefully the last because the last ones I said hopefully the last, but they weren't. This is as solid as I felt about it, but that's what I said before, so I guess we'll see. Yeah, this is more just to get my thoughts down. It's not going to be like a formal presentation because there's not a whole lot of data points. It's really 2 data points, and I'll get into why that is in a second. This is all kind of, this interpretation I'm sharing is essentially all contingent on like kind of a 4-quarter model, I think, of, it's probably the best way to say it, a 4-quarter model of typological development, type development. That's probably a better way to say that. Essentially, you're developing your first function during the quarter of your life, third function during the third quarter of your life, and fourth function during the fourth quarter of your life. And so that's just the framework I applied to myself. And that's the framework I've been applying to other people, and it's been working fairly well. Not to necessarily give types that I'd expect people to get, but just it gives like a consistent answer that's hard to deconstruct. But the reason, as the video says, that I think I'm an ESFP is essentially the diagnoses that I've received, I guess neurologically or psychologically, I guess. And I don't think this is going to apply to but I think in my case it's helpful because it shows that's kind of what a function is, especially when you look at it from like an Enneagram perspective, where it's like, you know, if you're a head type, or a fear type in the Enneagram, then that means that you have strengths and weaknesses around fear or thoughts or your mind. And I think that's kind of the same way the MBTI functions work, essentially. That you have strengths and weaknesses in that area that you're focused on in that given time period in your life. So, to get into it, essentially, what I'm interpreting as SE, or extroverted sensation, for my first quarter of life was this sensory processing disorder I was diagnosed with. And I think kind of a knee-jerk reaction to that is like, wait, you had difficulty processing sensations. That means you're bad at it. But like I said, kind of using the Enneagram framework of you have strengths and weaknesses around this stuff, I think that's a better way to look at it. Essentially, when I was younger, it was just I was doing like I had to do, or my mom had me doing, or I was diagnosed with and kind of not tasked with, but just assigned or worked. People worked with me on like sensory integration, so that's like essentially proprioception, balance, tactile integration, stuff like that. Very like kind of prototypical SE type stuff to do. I remember one exercise was kind of like looking for stuff, like just putting your hand in like a grain, like a bowl of rice, like dried, not wet rice. That would be disgusting, but just like uncooked rice and kind of feeling around for something that was in there. It was a lot of just somatic, proprioceptive, kind of integration therapy stuff. It's called like occupational therapy, I think. So for me, uh, I think I addressed that issue potentially, or I don't know about addressed it, but I integrated, I guess, that sensation function. I was capable in that area, sports I mentioned before, basketball, fairly good at that. Not that that's necessarily where, that ends up for an ESFP. We'll get into the second disorders shortly. But it's weird for me that they were both kind of disorders that I was diagnosed with. And that's not to say that those disorders aren't real. It's just to say that I think it might track or correlate with personality type. Of course, the other weird thing with this is that, well, I've never come out typed as an ESFP, or I've never gotten that on a test or anything like that. But like, And I think a little bit more evidence, to go on a bit of a tangent here, is people do get diagnosed with these types of things, but that doesn't mean that they are weak in the areas that those diagnoses are associated with. You have a lot of artists or musicians that get, diagnosed with different types of disorders that might affect their creativity or artistic talents, or maybe contribute to them. And this has been the case. Like, I think there's the guy John Nash from A Beautiful Mind. He was like schizophrenic or something like that, and that helped him with solving complex math problems. So that's kind of the framework or looking at these things from, these disorders I was diagnosed with. Um, so there's that. Um, and then also there's the idea of hormesis, which is essentially kind of like a response to stress that actually strengthens the system that's being stressed. So for me, I might have had some difficulty with sensory integration. My mom always says it's because I grew so fast, because I'm like 6'4". Relatively speaking, I was much taller when I was younger to other kids. Um, so with that arguably came with a lot of just imbalance in terms of, oh, I'm not in the same physical space somatically that I was before. So that's where the sensory integration stuff arguably helped with. And yeah, so sensory integration is extrovert sensation. That's the first argument, essentially. So that leaves me as either ESFP or ESTP. And then around the time I got to college, I was diagnosed with a mood disorder, which seems pretty FI, or, FI, maybe FE, very least SF, right? Because sensory integration, or sensory processing disorder followed by mood disorder, S to F. Yeah, that was a bit more difficult to deal with. But I think it might have been more difficult to deal with because it wasn't proactively addressed the same way that the sensory integration stuff was addressed. So that might be why it kind of came to a head in a more dramatic way. But yeah, mood disorder seems pretty FI centric. The only other option, and I should go over the other alternative options I'm considering for like the sensory processing stuff. It doesn't sound like an SI thing. I'm kind of using personality hacker definitions here, so like it wasn't like a memory thing. It was just literally just like your body doesn't integrate sensory information. That was diagnosed that my body didn't integrate sensory information as well as it could or should. And that's arguably because I think it was, in my case, maybe an oversensitivity to that type of stuff, which is kind of what a dominant function might look like, an oversensitivity. So like I said, like first quarter of my life, like that's 0 to 20 is sensory integration. And then arguably 20 to 40 is and will be like, mood integration, for lack of a better term. FI integration. So that's arguably what typology is too, because personality hacker talks about it as, or talks about introverted feeling, authenticity as like introspective and trying to figure yourself out, which is arguably what I'm doing and what everybody else is doing in typology. And the interesting corollary of this is that, like, if you're into typology, it's probably because of your FI. And it depends on when you're getting into this stuff, where your FI is in your four function stack. So if it's like first quarter stuff, it's primary function. If it's second quarter, 20 to 40, it's secondary function, and so on and so forth. So yeah, and that's the end of the data because I'm 27, so I don't know. The expectation is that I get into TE like around, I have some TE crisis, some effectiveness or extroverted thinking crisis around 40, or onset of 40. And then I deal with that, integrate it, and then NI, and who knows what's after that. But yeah, that's the idea, is that you have these 4 quarters that each get their own function depending on your function stack order. So yeah, that's why I think I'm an ESFP, at least currently. It's stuck around for a few days, so I think it might keep sticking. Hopefully it will. But if it doesn't, I'll share the next integration that I get on this typology stuff and document it and see where else it goes. But right now, sitting pretty comfortably at ESFP. So I think that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching.